All right, well, the presidential election is somewhat upstaging the big news of the hurricane this week, but we felt it's important to continue covering the storm devastation. So on the line right now, Matt Lauer from NBC News and The Today Show. He's joining us live from New York. Hi, Matt.
Hey, Jeremy. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I just, my home is here at the end of Long Island, so I just came back from a trip looking for gasoline, which is something that millions of people here are struggling with, and went out and was not successful. It's a great place to be if you need diesel fuel. It's a bad place to be if you need regular gasoline.
Oh, I can imagine. Now, you've lived in New York for many years. We're there a couple times a year covering red carpet events. Obviously, you know the lay of the land better than we do. First of all, where were you during the storm? And second, what were your thoughts afterward when you first stepped out? I envision it to be like in The Wizard of Oz when Dorothy opens the door after the storm and she's in a completely different place.
Yeah, it's not quite like that. Manhattan is where I live. Our home is on Long Island, but when I'm, during the week, I'm in there in Manhattan getting ready for the show. And so I live in an area that we did not lose power. It was nasty. It was windy and rainy, and it was tough. You could hear the windows rattling. I'm on the 6th floor of a building. But I did not lose power. When I walked out the next morning, in my direct neighborhood, buildings, the density of buildings in Manhattan can tend to block some of the damage. But you get to some of the exposed areas, in particular, what we call the Zone A areas in Manhattan, along the low-lying areas of both rivers at the tip of Manhattan, and that's where the real damage was. But I think my biggest reaction was when I got into the studio and I had them start to feed me some video before we went on the air of what we were seeing in other communities, and looking at the reports coming in from the Jersey Shore and from Long Island and from Connecticut. It was devastating. I hadn't seen anything like that in this area in an awfully long, maybe never.
Well, let's talk about that, though, because when we see the pictures on TV, of course, they don't do justice to what's actually going on. You've been out there. You've been talking to people. What is, I guess, two things. What's the most touching thing you've seen, but also what's the most heartbreaking?
Well, we did 7 hours of coverage on Tuesday, which was the day, the morning after the hurricane had come ashore. And then after we got off the air, I went out and got in a car with a crew, and I went out to an area of Queens called Rockaway Beach, and it's a peninsula of land kind of separated by a bay from Kennedy Airport and on the ocean. So on one side they have the bay, on the other side they have the ocean. It's not a wide strip of land. It's probably a half a mile across. And to drive down the roads there and see what had happened with, boats up, on the streets and homes flooded off their foundations and sand covering, 6-7 inches of sand covering the streets. The ocean met the bay. There were 5 feet of water through the streets of that community. And that's where, just, a half a mile from there, is where the fires broke out and the fire trucks couldn't get in. And you had these firefighters, many of them had friends and family members in that community, in their trucks on bridges, overlooking the scene of this Armageddon, these flames everywhere. And they couldn't get the fire trucks down into the floodwater to attempt to put out these homes. And one area, Breezy Point, they lost over 100 homes. I stopped on an intersection in Rockaway Beach where they lost 10 homes and businesses. And again, it was heartbreaking, and it's an area that's seen a lot of problems in the past.
Were people as prepared as they should have been? A hurricane doesn't just sneak up on you. There was plenty of notice. Did people take the precautions and the warnings as they were given?
I think there were probably some people who didn't take the warnings as seriously as they could have. The delicate thing, for example, in our business is, you need to get the word out. You have to try and do it in a way where you don't overhype a storm. And you try to be accurate. But, for example, with Irene, we told people in Manhattan that Irene could be devastating. And we drummed that home for a few days. And as it turned out in Manhattan, it wasn't. Millions of people were without power. And that was that storm that then kind of crossed over into Connecticut and went up into Vermont. And people up in Vermont were devastated by that storm with flooding, incredible flooding. But maybe some people saw in their own neighborhoods the aftermath of Irene and thought it wasn't so bad. And so when they started to hear about this superstorm Sandy, maybe they didn't take precautions. But I think a lot of people did take precautions. In my neighborhood where I live, people did. But there's only so much you can do about rising water. You know, sandbags can't hold back water when it really starts coming in, and that's what did most of the damage, the storm surge.
We've got to get back to the music, but let's recap the ways to donate to the Red Cross. You can call 1-800-RED-CROSS. That's 1-800-733-2767. You can also text the word Red Cross, all one word, Red Cross, to 90999. I know, Matt, you recapped this many times on Friday night's telethon, which is an amazing show. You pulled together a bunch of great stars to perform. We're going to have more with Matt Lauer from the Today Show, and later in the show, his colleague Al Roker will be joining us. But let's get back to the music right now.
Today's best music with Jeremy Bradley.
Jeremy Bradley here, joined by NBC's Matt Lauer. We're not going to play Where in the World is Matt Lauer. We know where he is. He's in the heart of the Hurricane Sandy disaster zone. Matt, you know, the hurricane happened at the end of October, so it ruined Halloween for a lot of kids. It's distracted from the presidential election, and it's going to take months, maybe even years, to get everything back together. But is life slowly getting back to normal? What's happening there today?
It is. I mean, you know, look, I'm looking out the window. I'm at my house on Long Island right now. I'm right between the bay and the ocean, and I'm not looking at any devastation. It's a beautiful sunny day here, but the stores are open and food is available, and you know, we didn't get hit hard. Now, you look at places in New Jersey, no, it's not back to normal. It's not even close. There are communities where people have not been able to go home, and when they do go home, they'll find they don't have a home left, and that's a very large area. I don't want to make it sound like that's just one or two isolated communities. You have to remember, when this storm made that left turn, it came into an area that is the most densely populated coastline in the United States. More than 50 million people were impacted by that storm. That's unprecedented. And so, no, in a lot of areas, life is not even close to back to normal. And you are exactly right. It will take weeks or months.
And I know you're not speaking for the Red Cross, but from your own observation, what help is needed the most? I mean, you've been talking with people, surveying the scene. What's your assessment?
Well, I mean, you know, the basics. There are people in communities that have no power. That is the biggest thing. And so that means in these, you know, early nights of November, they have no heat. And that means the stores in their area and little diners and shops aren't open. And so food is in short supply. Plus, keep in mind, you have no power. You can't keep any food in your refrigerator. So you're eating canned goods, and water, fresh drinking water, is in short supply. Gasoline's in short supply. Blankets for the people who don't have heat. Generators for people to power, you know, important facilities and communities. And the Red Cross does an incredible job 365 days a year. It's only at times like this that we tend to stop and talk about them. So I really encourage people to donate to them. 1-800-HELP-NOW. And the money that goes through that line will help the victims of this storm. And I think it's really important.
And what's also really important, though, is that we're hearing reports of New Yorkers really pulling together. There's a sense of community. I know Jimmy Fallon made the comment that New Yorkers are typically snobby, walk down the street, don't make eye contact with each other. But going through something like this, it's brought people together.
Yeah, and I don't know that I completely agree with Jimmy. I like him a lot, and I think he was being a little sarcastic. I've lived in New York my whole life. I was born there. And I don't get that sense. I think in some ways we like to kind of have a sense of bravado, and we say, oh, we don't need other people, and we don't even talk to each other. I think that's nonsense. I think as I go down, as I watch New Yorkers existing on a daily basis, it's a pretty warm group. It's a pretty social group. But yes, during a time like this, do we pull together? Sure we do. But people in all communities, all across the country, I mean, storms like this and tragedies like this tend to bring out the best in people. And I am seeing that in the streets of New York. I mean, even simple gestures, Jeremy, when communities are without power and one guy has a generator, and so he takes an extension cord and plugs it into his generator in his house and runs the cord with a power strip out to the sidewalk so passersby can plug their phone chargers in for an hour or two. I mean, that's nice. When restaurants knew they were losing power and their food in their refrigerator was going to go bad, they quickly grabbed it, set tables out on the sidewalk with grills, barbecue grills, and cooked for strangers and gave it to them. I mean, those things are very heartwarming, and it makes you feel good about, being a resident of this area.
So I have to ask you, with Thanksgiving right around the corner, this seems like a fitting question given what's happened. What are you most thankful for, and do you think people might be updating their lists a little bit this year?
Well, I'm always, by the way, Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday of the year, and it always has been. You're thankful for your family. You're thankful for your friends. You're thankful for community, for your health, for your safety. And you know what? These are things we do take for granted. And an event like this does make you stop and sit up and take notice. And it's going to be hard. It's going to be very difficult. And Thanksgiving's early this year. It's only couple of weeks away. And it's going to be a very difficult Thanksgiving for a lot of people in this area. And I hope that spirit that you were talking about a second ago of giving and caring and sharing will really come out at that time, because there are going to be people who are used to having Thanksgiving dinner around a great table in their home with their family and friends who don't have a home right now. And they're going to find themselves relying on the comfort and kindness of strangers. So I hope people here step up.
And our listeners can make a difference, as you say, so you can text the word Red Cross, that's all one word, Red Cross, to 90999, and the phone number 1-800-HELP-NOW. Especially this week, Matt, I'd love to be talking politics with you, but we don't have the time for that. And I guess you're going to be covering the disaster, though, not the election. I'm talking about the disaster of the hurricane all this week on the Today Show. Is that right?
No. Well, we're going to be doing both. I mean, look, we go into high gear on the election, and yet we will not forget. The reason I did that benefit and wanted to do it, that concert on Friday night of last week, was I was afraid that once the election came around, the focus would move off these people who need our help right now. I don't want that to happen. So we're going to be maybe a little schizophrenic this week, but we're going to cover these two huge stories to the best of our abilities.
And that's why, at the top when we started talking, I said that's why we're focusing on the hurricane this week. We don't want it upstaged with the election. So I do thank you for joining us today. Our thoughts are with everybody there in New York and New Jersey right now. Matt Lauer from NBC's Today Show, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Jeremy. It's been fun.
Today's best music with Jeremy Bradley.